My connection with blue catfish Chesapeake Bay blue catfish started about 6 years ago. I had come here as a potential graduate student, and the conversation somehow turned to blue catfish. And some people in the room seemed to hate blue catfish with a passion. So I asked them why, and somebody said, well, they are so ugly. And I thought, okay, that's subjective, but sure. Then somebody else said, they are everywhere, there are so many of them, and because they will eat anything that they can get, they are actually hurting our ecosystems. So clearly for these people, blue catfish was a trash fish, which was really surprising to me, because at that point I was in the Midwest, and in the Midwest most people love blue catfish. This guy certainly does not seem to hate blue catfish, and you can probably tell why. This is a freshwater fish that gets pretty big, fights hard, and that is why it sustains a really important recreational and trophy fishery. Everyone in the Midwest seems to have this fantastic story about somebody in their family once catching a giant blue catfish. Blue catfish are also famous because of the southern fried catfish. Just thinking about this makes my mouth water. It's so famous in the South. In the South, blue catfish is a cultural icon. It is also very important recreationally and commercially. And that is the reason they were brought to Chesapeake Bay region in the first place. In the deep South and in the Midwest, blue catfish is a treasure. Blue catfish were stocked in the tidal freshwater portions of the Chesapeake Bay in the 1970s and 80s, but since then they have expanded quite a bit in range. Now they are found pretty much in all sub-estuaries throughout the Chesapeake Bay region. They have also increased in numbers. A recent study actually found that there are about 1.6 million blue catfish in a 7-mile stretch of the James River. If you expand that between Richmond and Burwell Bay in the James River, that comes to be about 20 million blue catfish. That's a lot of fish, lots of hungry mouths. And because they will eat anything that they can get, they actually might be hurting our local organisms, such as the local catfish, which is the white catfish, maybe blue crabs, maybe some shads and herrings, maybe even sturgeon. And that is the reason there is increasing interest in trying to manage blue catfish, trying to know how far into the bay are they likely to come. Are they going to expand into the main stem of the bay itself? This is an important question because if they do expand into the main stem of the bay, then our estuarine animals are also in trouble, and we certainly do not want that. That is the question I'm trying to answer with my dissertation research. I'm trying to answer the question, are they going to come into the bay? If anything, what might be the factors that might limit the potential range expansion? What might be the factors that might limit the success of blue catfish in Chesapeake Bay region? So one of the first things that came to mind is, of course, size. If a fish can grow big, then that means that not a lot of other organisms will be able to eat it. Blue catfish certainly fits that bill. This is a world record blue catfish, 143 pounds. And it was collected not from the native range, it was collected from right here in Virginia. Longevity is also an important factor. If a fish can live long, then it means that it has multiple chances of reproduction to continue its generations. I personally aged blue catfish all the way up to 29 years old. So clearly, they get pretty old too. And on top of that, they actually provide parental care. What that means is once the female lays the eggs, spawns, then the male will actually hunker down and guard the nest, protecting the eggs and the larvae, which essentially means that the survival of the eggs of blue catfish is higher than the survival of the eggs of other fishes, such as the striped bass. Then we ask the question, how might climate change affect things? Maybe climate change will take care of this problem? We conducted a study, and we really found that blue catfish will probably actually welcome climate change because they prefer warmer waters. We found that during warmer years, they actually grow up to 63% larger than during cooler years. So, climate change is not going to be a limiting factor, and neither is food. We conducted an experiment to look at the question, what is the maximum food size that blue catfish might want to eat, and what happens when it gets a reduced ration size? And we found that, even at 1/3 of the maximum ration size, blue catfish will still continue to grow. So really, food is probably not going to be a limiting factor either, because there might be some areas in the Chesapeake Bay where the food might be pretty limited. So a lot of other fish may not be able to survive in those conditions, but blue catfish is probably going to be fine because it does not need a lot of food. Then finally, we ask the question, will salinity limit the range expansion? You know, blue catfish is a freshwater fish, and freshwater fish generally do not do very well in salt waters. Chesapeake Bay, by virtue of being an estuary, has a salinity gradient. As you move south and as you move towards the east, towards the bottom right corner where the bay feeds into the ocean, the salinity increases. So maybe salinity will limit the range expansion. So we conducted an experiment to look at the salinity tolerance of blue catfish, and we found that blue catfish have higher salinity tolerance than most freshwater fish species. Just our luck. What can you do? We had to choose this one species. So it turns out, especially during the wet months and wet seasons, when there's a lot of freshwater flow and the salinity of the bay decreases, pretty much all of the subestuaries in the bay, but also most of the upper part of the bay actually becomes inhabitable by blue catfish. So the question at this point is not so much how far into the bay are they likely to come, because we feel like they are probably going to end up everywhere. The question now is, what can we do about it? How can we make the best out of this poor situation? And one of the answers is probably harvest. If you can't beat them, eat them. Luckily for us, the harvest of blue catfish has been increasing over the last 20 years or so, but not enough. The market is still small enough that the harvest cannot increase, and that is where you come in. We need to increase the harvest of blue catfish, so spread the word. If we increase the harvest of blue catfish, that will make the conservation biologists happy, because that will mean that the population size will decrease and the total negative impact of blue catfish will decrease as well. This will also make the watermen happy, because fish in the water is money in the water. If we can get the fish out, we can increase the revenue for the watermen. So that is what we need to do. We need to increase the harvest of blue catfish, and that might be the way to protect the bay a little bit better. That is the take-home message that I want you to take away from this. If we play our cards right, we might actually have a way to develop a sustainable fishery for blue catfish. If we play our cards right, we might actually be able to make blue catfish a treasure, even in these parts of the world. And with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.